Welcome to another Nerd Rant.
Hi.
As you might hear, I'm sounding a bit like Will Arnett today. That is because I caught a cold. It isn't COVID, apparently, so don't fear. And today,
Especially me. I don't fear.
I mean, you're vaccinated and you're immune,
Yes.
realistically.
Am I? It's more than 4 weeks. I'm not sure if I'm still immune, but let's hope for the best.
More immune than I am. Today's topic, as you might be seeing by this beautiful image in the back, that is absolutely not an ego thing going on there.
The topic for today is that after or while COVID is still around, you had the opportunity to go to Barcelona.
Barcelona to OFFF, which is a design conference, one of the more prominent ones in the motion graphics / animation community that's happening in Europe.
Yes.
And I think it was the first time in 2 years that it's happened again. So, and it was really bizarre because here in Germany you still have lots of masks going around, people still being a bit careful, and Spain, in contrast, or Catalonia, is so much more relaxed about it. So anywhere you go inside, you as the German dude were basically one of the few guys wearing a mask, and you were really like looked at strangely. But that's not the topic here. The topic is just it's one of the first conferences that was happening in person again. We got invited by Side Effects.
Excited, yes.
And did a presentation together with our friend Vincent Schwenk.
Yes, and I could not go, unfortunately, because of reasons, and I was very jealous because not only is it a great thing to just attend a conference in person again after 2 years of staying at home down in the basement.
Yeah.
At the same time, Barcelona is just beautiful,
Yeah.
and the weather was beautiful, and I was jealous looking at the images. So now we are here, and I want to ask you, Moritz, how was it?
It was good. It was one of the best offs for me since I attended. I think it was the third or fourth off I've been to. And it was really good because it wasn't so crowded. I think you can still see the last ramifications of COVID happening, so people still being a bit shy to travel. And it was a bit more empty. It wasn't really empty. I mean, it was still crowded, but not as overly crowded as before, where you just couldn't get into talks sometimes. And also people seemed a bit more chill. So before that, I always called it the designers Mallorca. So people went there for partying, for meeting people, for just celebrating. And this time it was just chill.
Okay.
I think people...
I remember when I went to OFF for the first time, I think that was around the 2000s or so. And back then the conference was still very new, very young,
Yeah.
and very small. So I never encountered this Mallorca thing you are referring to. But nice to hear that it was cool this time.
And also I think that comes either with age or with experience in conferences. I didn't pressure myself of having to adhere to this strict schedule and catch every single presentation. I just hung around, talked to a lot of people, just
I mean, in reality,
strayed
talking
into...
to people is probably the more important thing.
It is,
anyways.
but in the end, you got to get to that point, because at first you're stressing out because you want to see this great designer talking on stage, this person you've been following forever, and want to see what they are in real life. And so you stress out of getting into this or that talk, and I just didn't have that in this case.
Okay, so you had a presentation with Vincent.
Yes.
And we can see you here on stage. So what did he talk about? And while we talk about this, I will just shuffle through your images a little.
So that's me being in the S-Bahn to the airport. So we talked about... I just threw basically every image that I had on my phone within those 2 days in there, so there might be some more plain ones in there, so let's not go too far into those. The talk that we had was about teaching a more visually minded designer proceduralism, and especially Side Effects Houdini. So with Vince, I mean, as you might have seen in our last few Nerd Rants that we did together with Vince, the focus here was more on getting a motion designer, a designer's designer that has a very good visual mindset into the more technical aspects of what Houdini is. And you can see that in the interactions we have on these nerd rants, that this poses challenges to both Vince and me, because on the one hand, for him it absolutely is something new. Thinking procedurally, thinking more in terms of building a machine that indirectly manipulates your outputs.
Yeah.
And for me, it poses a problem in that I cannot go into scripting directly. So I tend to solve many problems with Vex, or if I'd be you, with VOPs, because for both of us, this is very intuitive in a way that we learned a C-style scripting train of thought, maybe, or approach early on. And for Vince, or for more visually minded people, this isn't always the case. So you'd be stuck to more built-in tools of Houdini, which to you and me can be a bit counterintuitive, because for you and me, I assume it is easier to just memorize your Vex or C-style functions and your language, and you're good to go because you can manipulate anything.
Yeah, that's a very important point. It's very, very true that both of us, I think, we have a very strange grab on Houdini and use it more like an IDE, like a development environment. Yeah. What I love about Houdini is that I can just throw down a node, be it VOPs or Vex, and then I can start coding without the hassle of, I don't know, boilerplate code that I have to import first, and I don't have to care about compiling. That is what I like.
Exactly.
And to me, it's easier to create a group by just dropping a line of Vex than using the group node. But of course, if you are coming from Cinema 4D, and I think Vince is coming from Cinema 4D, then you have probably a different mindset where you're used to use the tools that are provided by the software. And of course, Houdini offers a plethora of these tools. It's just that both of us usually don't use them.
We never cared about learning what they're called like. We never cared about learning the hacks you can perform with their properties, with the options they come with. For you and me, it's easier to just write 2 lines of Vex or just drop down.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Yeah, it's true. It's a different mindset, because I just encountered it while recording my last tutorial in Houdini, where I had an attribute promote.
Yeah.
And the attribute promote, of course, you have to tell it which attribute to promote. And you have this string field there.
Yeah.
And I'm used to just putting in the attributes that I want to promote. But actually, Houdini offers a little drop-down menu where it sorts all the attributes that are in the geometry. You can select them from the menu. Something I would never do. Never.
Yeah,
never think about selecting stuff from the menu if I can just write it out.
Yeah, we ran into that when teaching Vince, where we didn't have an attribute promoted to points, and he couldn't select it with a drop-down, and was super irritated by that.
Yeah. Funny.
So that's one of the main differences I see when it comes to teaching Vince from my perspective. And I think what helped both of us was... on the one hand, just doing the usual divide and conquer. That means just focusing on one discrete area of Houdini, in this case, Vellum, because it's very similar to and very close to Vince's style, the cloth simulation, the soft body simulation. And I think he's just looking for a simulation tool that empowers him a bit more than what he's currently using and currently used to. So we stuck to Vellum. And also it helps that Vellum is rather new, and the UI paradigm purely lives in SOPs, or 90% of the time lives in SOPs. It's got its own set of discrete nodes that's not as overblown yet. And once you learn its logic, so constraints and then a solver, it's pretty accessible.
Yeah, it's straightforward.
Yeah. And also, the thing that quite surprised me when it came to him learning learning Vellum, is how different the approaches and expectations for softwares are, depending on what you're used to. So he was super hesitant when I told him to increase the resolution and increase the pieces of cloth. And he was dropping down 5 pieces of cloth. And I was like, just increase them a bunch. And he was like, okay, 15. And he was like, dude, increase them. Do it 100 or 80 cloth pieces. And he was like, seriously, it's not going to crash? And I'm like, nah. That's going to be fine. So you're super hesitant in this.
Reminds me of my tests when comparing systems back in the day when I tried to switch to exercise ice, where I compared the performance of thinking particles inside of Cinema 4D back in the day with ice and then Houdini, and found, I don't know, orders of magnitude of difference, where I could do the same setup to 2,000 particles inside of thinking particles, and then 20,000 in ice and 200,000 in Houdini. That is something, that is astonishing if you start out with Houdini. But on the other side, what interests me is I think a lot of people are flocking to Houdini or are trying to learn Houdini because they expect it to be more powerful than what they use.
Yeah.
But I found when teaching Houdini that it takes quite some time until you reach the point where it really starts to shine, where it shows its power. And that is sometimes a little hard to argue why you should put all the effort in learning Houdini, because it takes some time until you see the results, because simple tasks can be even more complicated than in other software.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is only partially true with Vellum. Vellum did a good job in simplifying some of the more complex parts.
Yeah.
I think the argument with Vellum is that you have, as always with Houdini, and maybe that's the general argument for this question, that as always with Houdini, you have a very granular approach to being able to control and dial things in.
Mm-hmm.
And you are not limited to any arbitrary constraints that a software developer or UX UI puts on you. So for example, you can increase your sub-steps or your iteration counts just to grotesque numbers, just by them not being limited and just being available for use. You can overshoot them as you want.
And not only that, but I always tell people the big advantage in Houdini is that you can control stuff on a per geometric entity layer. So you can tell Vellum to act differently on every constraint. You can tell whatever. You can put weights on every point. That is something that is not necessarily true for other software.
Absolutely
where
correct.
you can just set a value for the entire simulation. So I think there the power is buried.
Yes, and that is very accessible with Vellum. Not with every context or not with every simulation tool inside of Houdini. You'd be absolutely right to warn people to expect to be as fluent as quickly in Houdini as in other tools, but with Vellum it's closer to that reality. Maybe not perfect, but closer. And also what I'm thinking or what I'm witnessing currently is a resurgence in Houdini interest. I think we're now seeing the second wave of MoGraph artists flocking to Cinema 4D, flocking to Houdini. And I'm not really sure what the reasons for this are. I mean, we were on the first wave back then, like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago. And now we're seeing that second wave of interest, maybe due to the limitations of other tools or maybe...
I'm not sure. I think the field as a whole is just progressing.
Yeah.
And I could imagine clients expect more and more complicated effects or more and more involved effects.
Yeah, might be.
So the necessity for just being able to deliver these effects grows even in the MoGraph field.
Yeah.
And other tools have a hard time catching up, to be honest. I mean, I'm a big Blender fan.
Yeah.
Don't have to make a secret out of this, but... while I like the user interaction of the software regarding the capabilities, it did not really progress that fast. Yeah, sure, there's geometry nodes now, but the possibilities you have with geometry nodes are where you have been with Houdini 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And Houdini always adds the fresh, the hot, the new
Houdini,
stuff.
I think that's maybe one of the driving forces that we're seeing in this resurgent interest from MoGraph artists. You can really see the development and the pace of development put into Houdini, especially with the ability to download daily builds, to have production builds updated on a monthly or so basis.
Yeah.
Compare this to other tools, to competing tools, which do an update maybe twice a year.
Well, Blender updates on the same regular
Blender,
basis.
yeah.
It's just that they have so many areas where they just have to reach ground zero first before they can really innovate. That these updates are about different things. I have the impression too. If you, I mean, a lot of people interested in computer graphics just watch the field as a whole and find paper presentations and a little bit research results online, and then are excited about what is possible by the newly found algorithms. And chances are that these things hit the standard user first inside of Houdini. So I encountered more often than not that new stuff is just built into Houdini with a new update immediately after it came out on SIGGRAPH. And that is really nice. Not sure. So how did the talk go? What did the audience say? Was it well perceived?
So the thing with talks, I think in the end it went good and it was well perceived. The thing with talks is I always get like of this tunnel vision when I'm on stage. So I'm still not as nervous as in the beginning anymore when I do talks, but especially for the first 3 or 5 slides I'm nervous. And then I get into this tunnel where I have I can read the audience broadly and I think they appreciated the talk, but the subtle feedback is always lost on me because I'm in that tunnel. But I think from the comments I got, it was appreciated. Had a good feeling. I also, I think Vince did very well. So presenting with a new co-presenter is always kind of exciting because you never know how and where it goes. And I think it was great presenting with Vince. So at this point, thank you, Vince, for going on stage with me.
Yes, thank you.
I think in the end it went well. And I really enjoyed being on stage again. It's different when you're presenting in front of an audience. Although I have that tunnel vision, it's those individual one-on-one talks that you have before and after that really make the difference compared to a virtual conference. And the ability to just meet people on the floor.
Absolutely.
Just
Who
into
wants
people,
to
have a
stare
beer.
into these black squares of the Zoom interface anymore?
Yeah.
I think although all this digitalization progress has saved us during the pandemic, it's time to return back to real social interaction.
Yeah. And one thing that struck me, or that always strikes me with those conferences, is that you get the chance to meet, I wouldn't say necessarily your idols, but people whose work you've been following, people whose work you really like, and you get a feeling for how they are as an individual and privately. And it's surprising to me that most people whose work I admire are also people who I'd say are really great or at least decent human beings. And it's really rare that I found or meet someone whose work I admire and I say they are not so great in personal interactions.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was always, I was very happy in meeting, for example, Tendril, who are just a lovely bunch, meeting XK Studio, who are also just really amazing to hang out with, and just a bunch of really great individuals and people who I haven't seen for a long time. I mean, Vince and Vitaly being one of them, or Ronny Schmidt being.
And you can see them here, right?
That's those. With
everybody wearing sunglasses, indicating that you had sunny weather.
Yeah, except for me, who messed up bringing the sunglasses, of course. Yeah, also met a few students that I had taught workshops, and a few people whose work I admire. Yeah, it was just a great overall time. Did a bit of sightseeing in Barcelona. This is 6 and 5 Studio, maybe one of the most beautiful studio spaces I've seen so far, with this great outdoor space. And also I think the architecture reflects in their work. I think they are really consistent in their taste, not only in their work, but also how they design their space around them, around their work. Yeah, and Barcelona overall struck me again as this beautiful city, and I forgot how great it is, actually. And I mean, this is just ridiculous from the language standpoint, calling your fire department bombers. It's just weird in the Catalan language, I think, when you come from outside. Yeah,
what do we have here? Pink poo with an eye?
So I have no clue what this statue is there. It's pink poo with an eye. I wanted to paint out more of the presentation here. So this is Chris from Tendril presenting some of the work and some of their philosophies behind their work. And I really, really admire them for the ethics and for the approach they take to their work. Really fun talk, really interesting. And to me, with OFF, it's always a bit weird because I find that those talks that are not on the main stage are usually those talks that I find more interesting. And especially in this cinema, which is, I think, the intermediate, the second largest stage. It's a bit on the side, a bit secluded. Especially the artists getting invited there and talking there are those that really hit home to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been in the past few offs. Always, this has been my personal favorite for stages. The main stage, in my opinion, is a bit too. I wouldn't want to call it popular. It's just those very, very famous designers. They are accessible to a really broad audience, and they are interesting as well. Just for me, they are a bit too broad. Most of the time, it's presentations on their work, and they have to be accessible and very approachable by a very broad audience. So
it's like the Marvel movies of OFF.
Exactly. So they are very accessible. They are very. I wouldn't want to say bland, but those talks on the side stage are a bit more focused, a bit more nerdy, a bit more into what I love and I like. And also, sometimes you have the impression that the talks on the main stage are sometimes there for historical reasons. And you get to see your heroes like Carson, which has been huge in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But again, which you're not sure how much his work influences your current work or how relevant he is to your work, or at least to my personal work. I mean, it's amazing seeing those giants on whose shoulders you sometimes stand on. But again, I think those side stages are more relevant. And these are the amazing Lucas and Alexa from XK Studios, who again did a very great job not only in cranking out awesome design, but also building a team that is just a great bunch of people and just lovely. And again, that drives home my point of the people whose work I mainly admire, of them also being great human beings in a way. I mean, I might be a bit too hippie-ish here in this approach, but...
I don't think so. I think it's time for these social, for the feelings, really.
The feels.
It comes down to we are all human beings, and I think it is not about the work all the time. It's not only about algorithms. Sometimes it's time to really just interact with humans, right?
The thing is, when I started or when I was younger, I sometimes thought I had been blinded by some of the work. So I didn't have the individual feeling for how this work has been created.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes fell for very flashy or popular work, and then the people behind them were kind of, let's say, difficult or not personally my favorites. And I think that changed for me, and I don't know why. But currently I like...
Yeah, funny enough, because though in the art field,
yeah.
I think you put a lot more, or you look a lot closer on the person behind the art.
Mm-hmm.
The biography and the personality of the artist is important to the art most of the time. And you look at these people a lot more than in our field where we are creating design. I don't know.
But weirdly enough, I have the gut feeling that in the art world, you have way more ego involved and way more difficult personalities than we met or we meet.
I'm not too involved in the art world to exactly know if it's like that or not. Fair enough. Here we have Chris from Side Effects.
No, that's Will from the Mill. Oh, and Chris from Side Effects. Yeah, I'm sorry, absolutely, that's them. Yeah, lovely people as well, both of them. Again, happy to meet up with all those great people here, and it's just it was just fun hanging around with them and just overall good time. Yeah.
So fantastic. Really great to hear that, and I hope I will be able to join in next time, because I feel the urge to leave my basement soon-ish too.
I mean, you have your teaching duties. I mean, you're doing...
I have my teaching, that's true, but nevertheless going to a different country that has a beach and the sea nearby.
Although I haven't seen either.
Is a nice thing too. So let's look forward to a lot more interesting conferences, hopefully happening soon.
Yeah.
Hopefully with our involvement.
Yeah.
And maybe we see each other on one of these conferences in the future soon too, to get to know each other on a personal basis, because that is the best thing to know.
That is the best thing to do. So maybe if you plan going to any conference, to any meetup, just let us know in the comments. And maybe we'll figure out a way to actually meet up and get to know each other in person finally.
That would be fantastic.
All right. So I guess with that, as always, it is cheers and goodbye from our side. So,
yes.
Goodbye. See you soon.
Have a great one.